A Chinese chip, built without extreme ultraviolet lithography, without high bandwidth memory, without the CUDA software stack, reportedly outperforms Nvidia on a class of neural inference tasks. That sentence breaks the accepted logic of artificial intelligence hardware, where the rule has been simple: more compute, better silicon, faster memory, and the United States controls all three supply chains end to end. Before you read this as China catching Nvidia, stop. It isn't that. This chip isn't faster in general. It's faster on specific tasks, using physics that Nvidia's architecture doesn't use. In a paradigm the American export control machine wasn't designed to block. The benchmark is a lab result, reported but not independently verified at production scale. Hold that objection. We'll come back to it, because it matters. But here's the thing. If the reported result holds up even partially, it means the embargo didn't just fail to stop China on one front. It gave China a rational reason to build on ground America doesn't control. The real question this chip forces isn't whether China can build a better graphics processing unit. It's whether China can make the graphics processing unit the wrong question entirely. By the time this is done, you'll understand what analog in-memory and optical computing actually do differently, why those approaches land outside the export control logic, and what it means strategically when a niche win isn't really about the niche. To understand why this matters, you have to understand what the graphics processing unit actually is, not just as a chip, but as a system of control. The artificial intelligence compute stack that runs the world right now is built on four pillars: the CUDA software ecosystem that Nvidia spent 2 decades building, advanced fabrication nodes from TSMC using ASML's extreme ultraviolet lithography machines, high bandwidth memory from SK Hynix, Micron, and Samsung, and the export rules that link all of them together under Western or Western allied jurisdiction. Think of it as a highway system. The graphics processing unit gets you everywhere fast. It handles the dense mathematical workloads that training large models requires better than anything else at scale. But every on-ramp, every toll booth, every fuel supplier on that highway is owned by the same consortium. If you're banned from the consortium, you're not just slow. You're off the road entirely. China's chip companies have felt exactly this. Huawei's Ascend processors, Byron, Moore threads, all of them ran into the same walls. No extreme ultraviolet access for advanced nodes. No high bandwidth memory at scale. No CUDA ecosystem pulling developers in. You cannot replicate the highway by paving one lane. So what happens when a player who can't use the highway asks whether the destination actually requires one? The export controls were written by people who assumed it didn't. The October 2022 and October 2023 rules from the Bureau of Industry and Security targeted specific compute thresholds: total processing performance and interconnect bandwidth, calibrated to graphics processing unit class hardware. The logic was, if you can't get the chips, you can't build the clusters. And if you can't build the clusters, you can't train competitive artificial intelligence models. The controls assumed the graphics processing unit was the only viable architecture. That assumption is now doing significant work. Writing a lock for a door assumes everyone uses doors. If someone builds a window, the lock doesn't apply. What analog in-memory compute and optical interconnects do is build the window. Here is the mechanism, because it matters. In a standard graphics processing unit, data moves constantly between the processor and the memory. For a large neural network inference pass, that round trip is where most of the power and latency go. The processor asks for a number, the number travels from memory, the processor works with it, sends it back, asks for another. Millions of times per inference pass. This is what researchers call the memory wall, and it is a documented and persistent constraint of the graphics processing unit architecture. Analog in-memory compute eliminates that round trip by doing the arithmetic inside the memory array itself. The math happens where the data lives. Imagine doing your taxes by driving to the bank. grabbing a number, driving home, writing it down, driving back to deposit the result. Analog in-memory compute does the arithmetic at the bank. You never leave. Optical interconnects replace the electrical wiring between components with pulses of light. Light travels faster than electrons through copper wire, and it generates a fraction of the heat. The physics here is established and not in dispute. The reported chip combines these two approaches, and the reported result, on narrow neural inference tasks in lab conditions, not independently verified at production scale, is outperformance against Nvidia hardware. The mechanism is real. The specific claim requires the hedge. Now, why doesn't Nvidia just do this? The honest answer is the same reason the leader rarely switches paradigms. CUDA is the moat. It's what makes Nvidia worth choosing. Not just the hardware, but 2 decades of software, libraries, tooling, and developer habit built on top of the graphics processing unit model. Switching architectures means abandoning the ecosystem. A challenger with nothing to lose doesn't have that problem. This is where the first open question starts to close. You don't need leading node silicon when your architecture doesn't need to move data the way a graphics processing unit does. Extreme ultraviolet lithography gets you smaller transistors, which gets you more compute density on the same physics. If you change the physics, the transistor count stops being the only lever, but better physics on paper means nothing if the tasks don't match. So which tasks exactly? The reported outperformance is on neural inference, specifically on sparse or lower precision workloads, not training large models, not dense matrix math at scale. Those remain domains where graphics processing unit clusters, built on the conventional supply chain, are dominant and will be for the foreseeable future. The analog compute approach introduces precision trade-offs that make it unsuitable for the full numerical range that training requires. Training a model is building the car. Inference is driving it a billion miles. Once a model is trained, running it millions of times per day, answering queries, generating output, making predictions in real time, is where the compute cost lies in deployment. Inference is a growing and substantial share of real-world artificial intelligence compute spend, though the precise figure varies by analyst and use case. This is where the task match matters. The chip wasn't designed to beat Nvidia at building the car. It was designed to make the daily driving cheaper, faster, and outside the reach of anyone trying to control the fuel supply. The direct implication for the export control regime is structural. Analog in-memory chips can be fabricated on mature process nodes, 28 nanometer, 40 nanometer, that China's domestic fab SMIC has confirmed capacity to produce. These are not cutting-edge nodes, but they don't need to be. The architecture doesn't require the density that extreme ultraviolet buys you. Silicon photonics, in some implementations, uses standard complementary metal oxide semiconductor-compatible processes. The 3-5 compound semiconductors used in some photonic designs, indium phosphide, gallium arsenide, have supply chains that are separate from the logic chip supply chain the export rules target. Reports suggest China is developing domestic photonic fabrication capability, though the full scope of that capacity is not confirmed. Whether and how the Bureau of Industry and Securities rules apply cleanly to analog or photonic artificial intelligence compute architectures is, as of now, an unresolved and active question. The controls were calibrated for graphics processing unit metrics. Analog and photonic chips don't report performance the same way. They weren't the target because they weren't considered competitive. That gap in the control logic is exactly what the reported chip is built to exploit. And controls written for an architecture you understand take time to rewrite for one you don't. Time during which the alternative matures and embeds itself in infrastructure that becomes progressively harder to sanction after the fact. The net was designed to catch a specific fish, a fish that breathes differently, swims straight through. Here's my honest read, because the extremes on this story are both wrong. The triumphalist version, China has cracked artificial intelligence compute and Nvidia is finished, is not supported by anything in the record. This is a lab demonstration, a research prototype, reported but not independently confirmed at production scale. Nvidia's data center revenue, its CUDA installed base, its dominance in training compute, none of that is threatened by a benchmark on narrow inference tasks that hasn't been replicated publicly. The gap in general-purpose artificial intelligence training compute is real, and it remains. But the dismissive version, niche performance on weird tasks doesn't matter strategically, misses the structural point entirely. The bet isn't that this chip beats Nvidia on the scoreboard. The bet is that the scoreboard is wrong. If inference workloads grow and migrate to architectures built on different physics, the game Nvidia wins starts to matter less than the game being played on the next field over. The honest uncertainty is that niche wins only compound into leverage if the niche grows into the mainstream. That's not guaranteed, but it's also not nothing. China didn't build a faster graphics processing unit. It built a reason to stop needing one. The embargo raised a wall around a field, the graphics processing unit field, the only field the architects of the embargo knew how to fence. China's answer was to stop playing on that field. You can't be banned from ground. You built yourself. The real question the export controls forced wasn't, how do we build a better graphics processing unit? It was, why fight on the field your opponent designed, owns, and referees? So here's what I want your honest read on. Does it matter more that this chip can't touch Nvidia's core business today, or that it proves you can build artificial intelligence compute the embargo doesn't reach? Because those two answers have very different implications for where this goes next. I want your honest read in the comments and tell me why. Subscribe, because when this chip moves from lab bench to production line, or stalls, this channel will track exactly what changed and what didn't. One chip, different physics. A field the rules weren't written for? That's not a consolation prize. That might be the whole point.